Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 20th of January, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio. And we also have Diane, Rasmussen, McAdie joining us by video link from Edinburgh. Well, it's a special day. It's a bit cold and chilly here in Plymouth. But of course, the big news is that it was very cold for the Trump supporters who were queuing in order to get a glimpse of their man. Many of them were disappointed. If we could just pump that one on screen, please. There we go. And yes, this was the headline. Now, I'm going to say to the audience, I was amazed that there was no mention of climate change, because clearly that cold snow was a result of climate change. But climate change didn't get a mention, but the group YMCA did. So that's what Donald Trump thought was a good idea for him to be doing on stage with YMCA. I would question that. But if we have a look at it, what is he about to do? Well, he's, of course, about to bring in Trump 2.0 government, and we wait to see what that is about. But for our audience today, the key point is that we want to get people to look through the smoke and mirrors. We could spend all of this news program today talking about the Trump inauguration. We're not going to do that. Mike Robinson will be covering events on Wednesday. Today, we want to get our UK column audience to see through the smoke and mirrors. So let's have a little look at some of the sheer propaganda that's been pumped into people while the Trump inauguration is supposed to be the biggest event. So if we have a look at what we've got here, this is a whole heap of headlines. It's all about those Israeli hostages. And whilst it's a good thing that the young lady has been released, it is incredible the pro-Israeli media bias, the propaganda over this one event, while all the other thousands of lives are pushed into the background. And of course, that's not it, because the BBC got even more to say, including how disgraceful it was that Corbyn and a few other supporters had broken through a police cordon in order to protest further about the treatment of the Palestinians. But there's the BBC key question. Bowen, Israel has changed since Donald Trump's last term. Has he? Well, of course, Israel has been brutalizing the Middle East, but all of the British press, the media, the BBC, absolutely pro-Israel. This is, I couldn't resist, this is another one of the major headlines shown today, the fry-up deviants. This is the Daily Star simply taking the mickey, mocking and belittling its readers as it comes up with pure dross for its front page. But this is the state of the media in UK in 2025. So this is what we would like our viewers to really think about, and it's the system itself. So we've divided up into world events, the lens through which we look in order to see those world events. We've called that smoke and mirrors. And then we've got the local battle on the right, which we believe is the most important place for people to focus. So we're bringing a few of the key headlines that are really swamping people's minds at the moment. Of course, Trump, Elon, Ukraine, climate change, pandemics, the World Economic Forum, the woke agenda, Davos. It's all there pouring out through the media systems in order to keep our attention fixated on this. What can we describe it as? I've already used the word dross. So it's a pantomime on the world stage. Now, this is where it gets serious, because we need to look at how they are controlling not only what we see, but it's also what we think and do. And the mind control lens, clearly started with the US and the UK. It is mind control. They prefer to call it behavioral insights, but we're talking about using psychology to control the way people think and ultimately behave. And that's backed up by propaganda, blatant and disinformation, which clearly the BBC is a master at. But then we've got the vehicles that not only distort information, they're also implementing this globalist agenda. And what am I talking about? The think tanks, the foundations, the charities, and what are they producing? Fear, confusion, and chaos. Now, at local level, we've got our parliament, sort of, but the MPs are not doing their job. We've got local governments clearly not doing their job because they're just implementing Westminster policies. And at the bottom of the heap is the general public suffering not only from a lack of truthful information, but trying to see the world through this lens of applied psychology. Now, you'll notice a big space there. I'm going to fill the space because many years ago, the political charity Common Purpose said that there was a space between politics and local people, and they were going to fill that space. They were going to occupy it in order that the common purpose political agenda became the dominant agenda in people's minds. And I'm going to suggest to our audience today that's exactly what has been achieved. But the most important battle is not what's happening on the world stage. It's what is happening locally in the UK as a nation state, but in other European nation states, exactly the same control coming from the global organizations through the national government. And if we're going to fight the battle, we need to focus on what is happening in our own countries and how this globalist control is being enacted right down through the city council and the local council levels. So that's my request for people. Now, let's just think about what we're faced with our national government. Mike has been talking about this, the 100-year pact with Ukraine. But what have I put on screen here? Well, it was only 10 years ago that the BBC itself was warning about the danger of right-wing extremist Nazi organizations in Ukraine. And yet here we are in 2025 with a 100-year pact not discussed in Parliament, simply set up, we are to believe, by Keir Starmer. Well, of course, not even Keir Starmer's bright enough to come up with that pact, so clearly that was a globalist policy. What could possibly go wrong? Let me show you how this local system works. And I'm going to stay focusing on Ukraine. If we have a look at the Migration Observatory, which informs on international migration and public policy, it tells us that around 217,000 Ukrainians were living in UK as of the 30th of June 2024. Who are these people? What are their background? What are their beliefs? What are their political allegiances? We have no idea. But the last we were told by the BBC was we should be very concerned about the rise of a vicious right wing inside UK. But let's have a look at who else is commenting on asylum. And surprisingly, it's the British Red Cross. So here we have a charity. And what we're saying to our audience is you need to see through these organisations and have a look at what they're really doing. So I was surprised to find British Red Cross with a specialist document talking about the nation state in UK. That's what it was called. But what is it talking about? It's talking about asylum. It's talking about bringing in more people from more countries into the UK. And if we expand part of this little table on screen, we can see that what's actually being said by the Red Cross is 197,100 people have arrived through the bespoke Ukraine visa scheme. Who are these people? We just don't know. And the question which the audience need to think about is the Red Cross as a charity. Is it an aid provider or a political policy enabler? If we have a look at what the Red Cross says about itself, and this is Liz Padmore, the chair, she talks about the continued fighting in Ukraine. She's talking about Syria, flooding in Libya. But if we go on, we've now got the Israel conflict. We got hunger. None of this is being stopped by the Red Cross. What they're actually doing is facilitating government policy. And we get a strong idea about this in this slide on screen, because here she is talking about the impact of climate change. And as the extreme weather hit communities in all 4 UK nations, it's wrecked homes and businesses, causing heartbreak. So what we're saying to our audience today is whatever we're seeing on the world stage, what we've actually got to look at is how the UK is being controlled, how the UK is being broken up. That is what we've got to stop if we are then going to deal with the power of organisations such as the World Economic Forum or Davos or the UN's 2030 agenda. So don't be too pulled into all of these events all over the world. We suggest to you the danger in UK is right at home, and we've got to get a grip of our local political system, and we've got to get a grip of those politicians in Westminster. Ben, I know you've been looking at part of this yourself because you've been taking another look at the World Economic Forum, but it's clear that the political power base is outside UK now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. And good afternoon, everyone watching at home. It is late January, so we are off to the Swiss Alps, to Davos. It is the World Economic Forum, the grand convening of the self-proclaimed political, cultural, and economic, should I say, elite from around the world. They are committed to improving the state of the world. They've been doing it since 1971. I don't think the world is getting better, actually, as we're going to get into. And this year, they are focusing on what they call collaboration for the intelligent age. And they're going to be responding to geopolitical shocks, stimulating growth to improve living standards, and stewarding a just and inclusive energy transition. Now, Diane is going to talk about some of the pre-statements that have been made ahead of the meeting, which starts today. And then we'll probably do some commentary on this next week and then maybe even the week after, because this is a key point of dissemination for the global plans, as you will no doubt be aware if you're a regular viewer of UK Column. I'm going to look back, actually. I'm going to look back in time and examine the impact of the World Economic Forum. And in particular, I'm going to be looking at wealth inequality, which has grown exponentially over the past 50 to 60 years. So these statistics focus on the United States from 1962 to 2014. And what we're seeing here is the share of total household financial wealth owned and controlled by the top 1, 9, middle 9 and bottom 90% of the US population. So essentially, this is the owners, the managers, and the workers, right? And what we can see is that over the past 55 years or whatever it is since these numbers were initially collated from 1962, the amount of wealth controlled by the 1% has basically doubled at the expense of everyone else. The rich have got richer, the poor have got poorer. This isn't just in the US. I believe that this is a global story. These statistics are focused on America, but I think this is happening absolutely everywhere else around the world. And the most important thing, I think, to understand about this is that it isn't an accident. This is deliberate. The point of a system is what it does. If the global economic system is accruing ever more wealth and power into the hands of an ever more distant elite 1%, that's being done on purpose. Right. This comes from Stafford Beer, the British theorist and writer. He uses this acronym, POSIWID, which I like. I'll just leave that with you. I'm a big fan of this one. It's not the 3-letter acronym. It is a 7-letter acronym. We're really going in hard today. And I believe this is all directly linked to, amongst other organizations, the World Economic Forum and the policies that are formulated there and handed down there on an annual basis since it was founded in 1971. Right? We're going to examine a few of the key events relating to the Economic Forum, World Economic Forum, and how they've kind of tracked very neatly alongside this huge increase of wealth being controlled by the top 1%. Now, as I say, it was founded in 1971 by the gentleman on the right-hand side there, Klaus Schwab, Uncle Klaus, as I shall call him. And this was done at the behest of global money, in particular David Rockefeller, and global power, in particular Henry Kissinger. Both of those men were mentors to Klaus Schwab, and this was ultimately a project of the geopolitical elite, the global industrialist and political class, who were seeking to entrench their position in perpetuity. That is the game plan, and that's what they've delivered. And actually, 1971 is really a key year. I direct your attention to this excellent website, which is What the Fiddlesticks Happened in 1971. We'll provide a link to it. And it provides a lot more data on these international trade and economic inequality issues. But it also highlights that 1971 is where USA to Israel really kicked into gear, which I think is quite interesting. I'm not saying those things are directly linked to each other, but they could be. And it's also the year that the United States ended the convertibility of the US dollar to gold. Right, so this ended the Bretton Woods system, which was put in place at the end of the Second World War, and this made the dollar a fiat currency, really importantly. Now, I can't prove it, but I think it's probably safe to assume that that was certainly discussed and maybe even agreed in Davos at the start of 1971, before that policy was put in place by Richard Nixon later on that year. And it's important because the first big uptick that we can see there in the wealth of the 1% comes in 1987. And I think that that directly relates to Black Monday in October 1987, where the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell by 22.6%. This was the first global stock market crash, the first global financial crisis, and it was the first time that quantitative easing had come into effect, where money was printed to be injected into the global financial system in order to prop up the stock market and ultimately to rescue the banks at the expense of, in this instance, the middle classes, the middle 9%. Yeah, and that huge transfer of wealth could only have happened because of the Federal Reserve System, this fiat currency system that was put in place in 1971 at the same time that we saw the initiation of the World Economic Forum. And then from then on, it's basically a straight upward line for the 1%. And that was overseen by these key interventions. So you had the Global Leader of Tomorrow program from the World Economic Forum, which appeared in 1992. That event was convened by Uncle Klaus and the Prince of Wales. You can see on the right-hand side there, as he was then, now Charles III. And unfortunately, Václav Havel, the former Czechoslovakian president, who is actually a bit of a personal hero of mine, he was there at that event. So, no one's perfect, apparently. But the Global Leader of Tomorrow program, extraordinarily influential. So here's just a small selection of the people that were on the inaugural class of 1993. So it was announced in 1992. Then the first class happened in 1993. We had Angela Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany, doing that funny hand sign these people like to do. Jose Manuel Barroso, former president of the European Commission, who then very famously left and within 2 months went to become the chairman of Goldman Sachs International, real revolving door type stuff.
As you do.
As you do, absolutely. Yeah, well, why else get into top level of politics if you can't go and milk it later, right? Tony Blair, leading me neatly onto Tony Blair. I mean, that's essentially what he's been doing. Gordon Brown, now currently trustee at the Rockefeller Foundation. Vladimir Putin was on the class of 93 for the Global Leaders Tomorrow program, right? So apparently these people are geopolitical rivals, but actually they all come from the same lineage. They've all been selected for leadership, and actually we'll provide a link to, there's some great research done by the Malone Institute, which basically shows that every single alumnus of the Global Leaders of Tomorrow and the Young Global Leaders program, and you can see that these people are absolutely everywhere. You just look across the top levels of political leadership anywhere in the world right now, then these people are in positions of power and authority, right? So they're running the global system. That then transitioned over to the Young Global Leader program in 2004, which we know that Klaus Schwab is very proud of. He's proud of the fact that he has penetrated the cabinets of countries with our young global leaders. And so there's lots of political faces in here. And this is still running, right? So this started in 2004. It's still running today. We have Sanna Marin, the former PM of Finland, Trudeau from Canada, Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand.
Just a coincidence, Ben. It's all a coincidence.
It's a finishing school for tyrants, basically. And it's not just politicians. You've got activists like Alicia Garza from BLM, Leonardo DiCaprio, stars of stage and screen, as they say, right? But also Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and some of the less known faces that we actually talk about quite a bit on the UK column. So Brent Hoberman, who we spoke about last week, a couple of weeks ago, Daniel Sachs, Lisa Witter from the Apolitical Foundation, right? They've all been involved in the acceleration of that red line upwards, right? That's what these people have been doing. That's what they've delivered. The point of the system is what it does, right? So whatever they say that they're doing, the net outcome has been the consolidation of wealth and power into ever smaller numbers of hands, right? And that's not just the young global leaders, it's also the shapers. They oversaw the financial crisis as well, forgot to mention that. But we got the global shapers from the World Economic Forum. So this is the under 30s. Yeah, so you've got the GLT, the YGL, and now you've got the Global Shapers Program in 2011. So what's that? Change begins here. We've got over 11,000 of these people, these young people in 502 locations in 155 countries around the world. And Klaus Schwab is extraordinarily interested in connecting with these people. Apparently, they are the most affected stakeholders when talking about our global future. They're also the people who have the most innovative ideas and energy to build a better society for tomorrow. They tap into youthful energy, youthful idealism in order to build their system. Right? It's really important, this stuff. And who's leading the global shapers? So Klaus Schwab, but also David Rubenstein from the Carlyle Group. So one of the people who was most benefited personally from the war in Iraq. Right, he's leading this global youth movement, apparently. Yeah, and that has delivered, as I've pointed out, this huge disparity in wealth, this huge and increasing level of wealth inequality. And these numbers here go to 2014. Yeah, so since then we've had the UN SDGs in 2015, the UN and World Economic Forum Strategic Partnership announced in 2019, which is essentially the fascist corporatist system that Mussolini, who invented fascism, actually said was the definition of fascism. He called it corporatism. That's what these people have delivered. Then, of course, we had COVID, the Great Reset in 2020, mass automation through artificial intelligence, the COVID vaccination program. And essentially, if these numbers, if we can get that just back on screen for a quick moment, if that line carries on going up at that trajectory and we run it out to 2025, this goes up to 2014, we're probably looking at about 85% ownership of wealth by the 1% now. And as we know, the idea is to drive that to 100%. They want to own everything. We'll own nothing, and apparently we'll be happy about it. I suppose the question is whether we're going to let these people take us down that journey any further. And I do think that they're actually quite unsettled. And I'm just going to finish up before Diane gets into some of the detail of what they're up to this year with this video of Naguère Woods speaking at the World Economic Forum back in 2023.
The good news is the elite across the world trust each other more and more. So we can come together and design and do beautiful things together. The bad news is that in every single country they were polling, the majority of people trusted that elite less. So we can lead, but if people aren't following, we're not going to get to where we want to go.
Thank you very much for that, Ben. And I'd say to the audience, she is telling you what needs to be done. We need to break the chain from local level through to these people. If you don't follow the policy at local level, a local community within your own nation state, they are powerless. So don't get focused on the glitter of the Trumps and the wars overseas too much, because the real battle is in your own country. Diane, welcome.
Thanks, Brian. And hello, Ben. And Ben, thank you for that fabulously uplifting video. That was a wonderful way to end your segments. I wanted to follow up on what you've done so far because, and as people know, in my typical fashion, I do things so that our viewers don't have to. So I watched the press conference that was available last week from the World Economic Forum. And it was a very tense presentation. It was they were letting us know basically what they want the media to focus on. And unfortunately, I can't possibly understand why the UK column was not one of the media organizations invited to participate in this press conference, but unfortunately we weren't. So I thought I would kind of take some highlights of some of the clips from this press conference and relate them to some things that I found in the past, just to kind of take a little bit of a different look at what they wanted to tell us about what they are going to be speaking. So one of the first things that they mentioned in this press conference, before they even got into the theme of the conference really, was about Trump's contribution, where he's doing a virtual talk to be given later this week. So let's hear what Borge Brende, the president and CEO of the WEF, had to say about Trump.
President Trump, in his first week, he has joined twice physically in Davos. Before, as president, he will, on Thursday afternoon, he will join us digitally, online, live, in a dialogue with our participants. We think that will be a very special moment, also to learn more what the new administration has of policy priorities.
So that's a really important thing. He's been there twice physically. They're happy he's coming in at least a third time right after his inauguration. So let's take a look at who introduced Trump in 2018 in Davos, and what did he say?
Mr. President, on behalf of the business leaders here in the room, let me particularly congratulate you for the historic tax reform package passed last month, greatly reducing the tax burden of US companies, fostering job creation, as well as stimulating economic growth in the United States, but also providing a tremendous boost to the global economy.
So anyone who says that Trump is anti-establishment and anti-deep state and so on, I think they should watch that clip, because there's more that Uncle Klaus Schwab said in relation to how wonderful Trump is. So as Ben said, this year's theme is collaboration for the intelligent age. And if we go deeper into the press conference, we can start to see what they are really going to be talking about. So here's Merrick Dusik, who's one of the managing directors.
With the notion of the intelligent age, this is a broader spectrum, and so you will see us in the program addressing, of course, AI, Gen AI, but also biotech, clean tech, health tech, space tech, sensing technologies, robotics, advanced manufacturing, advanced energy technologies, and I could go on.
He could go on, but he doesn't have time. And I wanted to go back to, if we can play this video silently. This was a video that the World Economic Forum posted on YouTube. It's from 3 years ago, and it talks about firefighting. So 4 innovative tech inventions helping fight fires in California. This sensor-packed robot can be dropped into fires from above to detect hazardous gases and provide eyes on the ground with cameras. It's made by Squishy Robotics, a startup from the University of California, Berkeley. Zone Haven is an evacuation platform that uses public data weather modeling to predict the spread of wildfires. So we're seeing a wonderful map there, and help officials and first responders decide when to evacuate. Google has added fire location information to Google Maps. Informed by satellite data, it alerts users to nearby wildfires and sends an SOS warning if users are heading towards a blaze. Pachama is tracking how much carbon capturability is lost when trees are taken down, uses satellites, AI, and machine learning to estimate a forest's carbon capacity and inform how lost forests can be restored.
By leaving them alone.
2020 has been a record year for wildfires along the U.S. Pacific coast. Blazes have burned more than 4 million acres of land, more than double the previous annual record, destroying more than 8,400 homes. Experts say climate change is increasing the risk and extent of wildfires, which suggests we need to learn better how to live with them. This will require behavioral changes as well as technical innovations, but firefighting can be a tough market for tech entrepreneurs. Investors often don't see cash-strapped fire departments as a lucrative market, but the orange skies over Silicon Valley could inspire a change. So what I need to ask is, we've just seen what's happening and still continues to happen with the fires continuing to burn in California. Why have these wonderful technologies not been used? Why is it still happening 2 weeks later? I'm just going to ask that question. So the next thing to highlight from the press conference was climate finance, of course. So here is another managing director. Her name is Kim Hwai Neo.
We will be releasing this week a document, is a partnership with CDP around how companies are progressing on their climate and nature agenda. And this analysis looks at companies that account for 2/3 of global market capitalization. And the stats will reveal that only about 10% are making meaningful and tangible action on the climate nature agenda.
So CDP was formerly called Carbon Disclosure Project. It has assets of over $100 trillion and works with 827 institutional investors. It is based in the UK. They say, CDP says, which is, as we will see, it's connected directly with the World Economic Forum. We already face $30 trillion in damages a year by 2050, with incomes to decline by almost 20%. So let's hear what Ray Dalio, who's involved with WF and is the founder of the hedge fund Bridgewater Associates, had to say about climate finance.
How exactly is this crisis impacting the global economy as well as our politics today?
Well, economically, it's estimated that one way or another, it's going to cost about $8 trillion a year. And the world GDP is $100 trillion. So it's going to be expensive. If you don't deal with it, could be catastrophically expensive. If you deal with it the way we are right now, money has to go into it in order to be able to make a progress in mitigating, sticking to the 1.5 degrees and such.
And finally, my last point is Borge Brende talking about Ukraine and Syria.
We are very honored to welcome back to Davos President Zelensky. He will be with us on Tuesday with a special address. He will also take questions. And as we know, there's also a group of CEOs for Ukraine, because Ukraine will also in the future, when there is no war more, will also have to rebuild. The devastation is terrible, and the CEOs for Ukraine will also be part of that. It will also be interesting to see the political discussions around Ukraine in Davos. Is there a path for peace based also on important principles from the UN Charter? On the Middle East and North Africa situation, as I already mentioned, of course, we are all very interested in knowing the path for Syria.
So it would appear as though they don't really know what the paths are. They just know that there's things going on and they don't really seem to have an answer for it. But I wanted to bring the viewers' attention to the issue of the advanced technologies and intelligence weapons and so on, and in particular directed energy weapons, which has been in the news recently for various reasons. Let's hear from 2011 from David Ignatius from the Washington Post and what he said at Davos.
I think we're at the hinge of quite new and disruptive technologies in warfare. We talked about communications technologies, but as directed energy weapons, as exotic cyber weapons come into play, the systems we've built and on which we've depended for power suddenly become, I don't want to say obsolete, but a lot less efficacious. And people are trying to figure out what that means. So there are a series of changes. Every time I say that we're going to do more with the State Department, the Pentagon ends up doing more of what the State Department should be doing because it's got the resources.
So there's more available in the show notes if you want to link to those government reports from the U.S. government about the current use of directed energy weapons programs in military use, as well as from 1970, a previously secret report about using forest fires as military weapons. So lots of questions still to be answered, Brian and Ben.
The document about the forest fires on screen, if we can. There we are. So final report, June 1970, US Department of Agricultural forest fires, forest fire as a military weapon. And that was classified secret at the time. So we'll just leave viewers and listeners to think about that. But essentially what Diane is showing in that segment is that the real policy creation is not coming through the UK national government or indeed the US national government. It's coming through these globalist bodies. And that is what has got to be stopped. So if audience like what the UK column is doing, then please do support us. We can only do what we do with your financial support. You can help us by making a donation or taking out a monthly membership or an annual membership or taking out a lifetime membership with us. But you can also make purchases, struggling today, apologies for that, purchases from the UK column shop. And as we've said, for those of you interested in health products, we do stock Clive de Carle's health products, and we make a little percentage on those. Now, the whole idea of the UK column material is that you share it, and let's just come back. We try and share it on as many platforms as possible. Of course, we are still blocked on YouTube, but we do our best. But please share it and give us some acknowledgement. And this one, I think, is yours, Diane. Is that correct?
Yes, that is the Scottish People's COVID-19 Inquiry, which is hosted by a group I am a member of a committee of for Common Knowledge Edinburgh. This will be on the 22nd of February. Tickets are now available. We'll be serving lunch and tea and coffee and so on throughout the day. It is an entire full-day conference. And I will be one of the speakers talking about the propaganda leading up to and including the 2020 and 2021 period. We all know what happened then. So there will be a full day of speakers as well as testimonies from survivors of certain things that went on during the COVID era.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And also the interview with Dr. Mike Yeadon, Licensed to Kill, Drugs and Consequences. That's now up on the UK column website. We've also got Farming Interview, which is with Sandy Adams and Roger Meacock, and of course Debbie Evans. So you can find that. And tomorrow, 1 o'clock, the interview with Heather will be going out. And again, I think you've got some comments on this one, Diane.
Yes, I did this interview in December when it was recorded. So there's been some updates since then. And hopefully my segment later on in the news will get people up to date. But this was a very important interview. Heather is the convener of the Student Academics for Academic Freedom. They're doing some amazing work supporting students who are not feeling safe to speak out for, unfortunately, very good reasons. So please tune in and join me to watch Heather and myself have a discussion about this tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Well, we're going to move on to the subject of child abuse, child protection. As the UK column has said for a great many years, child abuse is the means by which the political system is controlled. This is the basis of blackmail and control of people in powerful positions. But here, just wanted to remind people that the Finethi case, we're still very much involved, and we will be reporting on more of the women who have kindly agreed to speak out with the UK column. But a significant event has taken place in that one of the original managers at the Finethi House institution is now going to stand trial. A date has been set. So this was part of the report from Sky News. A woman is stand trial accused of historical abuse of girls at a former residential school. Patricia Robertson, 76, faces a total of 26 charges said to have occurred at Finethi House between 1967 and 1983. And a little bit more here. There's a string of allegations of cruel and unnatural treatment of the girls, including claims of physical violence. Some of those involved are said to have been as young as 4 or 5 at the time. Now, I'll say once again, we've already done a couple of interviews. Those will be posted as part of a group of interviews from Fenethy women. Extremely poignant, and we really want to thank the Fenethy ladies for having the courage to come to the UK column to tell their stories. Now, against that backdrop, many of those Fenethy ladies say that the Scottish government is still blocking the truth from coming out about what happened at Fenethy. And this is the common theme, whether it's north of the border in Scotland or it's south of the border in England and Wales. And thank you very much for the viewer, Priscilla, who sent this email through. She says to me, I may have missed you saying it, Brian, but just in case, it's very interesting that Keir Starmer whipped his MPs to vote against the grooming inquiry, but then abstained from voting. So thank you very much for that, Priscilla. And this, yes, is a very key point, double standards as Keir Starmer squirms against the backdrop of those grooming gangs and why they were never properly prosecuted. But let's have a look at another couple of headlines here, because here's the Mail talking about a ban on naming the judge who handed Sarah Sharif over to kill her father. And the paper says it will have a corrosive impact on public confidence in the justice system. Well, if the Mail believes anybody in the child protection system has got faith in courts, then the Mail needs to wake up rapidly. But here we are, keeping a judge's name secret in order to protect the state and the system itself. And in contrast to this, we've got another Mail article here. The headline says it all. For 19 years, I believed my newborn daughter had died. Then I discovered the truth. She was snatched at birth. Now, over the recent weeks and months, we have been getting a flood of inquiries from people asking if we can help in some of these horrific cases. So this is a really key item. If our children are not safe from the state, nothing is safe from the state. And again, in the first instance, we need to look at what's happening in the UK rather than get distracted what's happening on a global scale. So this is just one of the reports that came in. Could you please give me some advice on how to get my children home? I think something is happening. I have pictures of bruising, and the local authorities taken those children away. I've got a much longer one here where 2 grandchildren have been taken away, and yet when the grandmother sees these children, they're covered in scratches, bruises, bite marks, injuries, missing parts of teeth. And the key point of these stories is that none of the state child protection institutions will deal with the problem. If the parents or grandparents talk to the local authority child protection teams, they won't act because they're complicit. The police will not act. The courts will not act. MPs will not act. And the government itself will not act. This is not coincidental. This is deliberate abuse and grooming of children inside UK. And until this is dealt with, we shouldn't be surprised that the government can do what it likes on a world stage, whether it's set up 100-year partnerships with Ukraine or it's create money out of nothing. The children are absolutely key. And why do we need to pay attention to this? Well, one of the key things is that children and the abuse of children effectively is big money. This is another Daily Mail article here from the 19th. Children's homes run by private equity rake in millions. And it says that some of England's biggest privately run children's homes are raked in more than 95 million in profit. But it goes on to say that 83% of the children's homes are under private ownership, and the average cost of placing a child in care was $281,000 a year. So if we multiply that figure by roughly 75,000 children in care, this is a £1 billion operation to abuse children, care for them, in inverted commas, and make profit. This is not just happening in UK, so thank you very much to the overseas viewer in the Netherlands who said that child abduction by the state is going on in the Netherlands, and this involves approximately 60,000 children. And of course, the Dutch Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, now installed as chief of NATO, was very closely involved, deeply involved in this scandal. Exactly the same in European countries as in the UK. Another email from a viewer, thank you very much for this, talking about Ivor Kaplan and pointing out that how he'd voted to allow the promotion of homosexuality in schools, and also the lowering of age of consent for homosexual activity to 16. And the person says, I wonder if he wanted it to be 15. Well, that's a key question. We don't know the answer, but we do get some idea of the mindset. And if I bring this up on screen, the headline says it all. Child abuse is without borders. It doesn't matter your religion or nationality or lack of religion. And here we've got reports from the Times of Israel that many accused Jewish paedophiles in the US are fleeing back to Israel because they are safer. They are protected in Israel. And this is a CBS News investigation, how Jewish American paedophiles hide from justice in Israel. Not a subject on the headlines of the BBC or the UK press today. When they're talking about Israel, they prefer to focus on that one young lady released as a hostage. And I just remind people that an interview with a mother brave enough to speak out, although we couldn't identify her, is up on the UK Column website, Child Stealing by the State, a mother criminalised for speaking out, part 1. So if you haven't seen that, go and have a look. Part 2 will be out shortly, and what the mum has to say, truly astonishing. Diane, let's bring you back in, because of course you did so much work for the UK column, and for those Fenethy ladies, it's really encouraging to start to see that story coming to the surface.
Yeah, it's amazing, Brian. I know this court case has been a long time coming. It's been delay after delay for the court case to start to come out and actually start to happen. And then again, the next phase of it won't be until September, according to the current schedule. But we are with the women 100%. We will not go anywhere. We will continue to support them in whatever way we find to be possible. And we will certainly continue to provide coverage and more interviews and more interaction with them. I also have loads of research that has not been brought to the surface yet. That is just waiting to come out. So I'm hoping this year I'll be able to write up something that's a bit more substantial so that we have the entire situation documented that the women really want me to do along with them. So there'll be a lot more to come this year.
Okay, thank you. What have you got for us?
Well, in addition, I have some information about academic freedom and kind of where things are with the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act 2023, which I've reported on previously. This only covers England and Wales, unfortunately does not cover me up here in Scotland. Bridget Phillipson, when she came into place as Education Secretary, she stopped the act, although it had already obtained royal assent and was ready to go ahead. And in response, there was an open letter that was written to Bridget Phillipson, started by Academics for Academic Freedom and supported by the Free Speech Union, that happened over the summer. Last week, because of all of this pushback that she apparently didn't even expect, which is interesting, we want our academic freedom in academia, she agreed to revisit the act, but with some changes. So let's hear what she said about that in the Commons last week.
He did not rise to the challenge. Unworkable duties on student unions, a tort clogging up the court system, and the Office for Students obliged to consider a vast number of complex complaints. And there are also serious concerns over the impact the Act could have on the welfare of minority groups. Many are worried that it could lead to increased harassment and discrimination on campus, and that the Act could push providers to overlook their safety.
So what the original version of the act included was a tort element, which meant that if students felt like they had been, or academics felt as though they had been discriminated against for sharing their views or exercising free speech, they could go and sort of protest against that through the legal proceedings. But that's something that she has taken away. But I do have to ask, because of the things that have happened to me and other people in the past couple of years, if those complaints against those of us who have non-standard views in academia today will still be able to file all the complaints and grievances that they're already doing. And one student, since we're talking about students this week, is that I want to highlight is Connie Shaw, who was suspended from student radio at the University of Leeds late last year following her interview with a gender detransitioner, saying that she was transphobic. And I want to show a little bit of this interaction by this amazing documentary that Andrew Gold did. So Connie is the woman with the glasses, and the other girl wanted to approach her about her so-called transphobic views, and let's see how they both behaved.
You can understand why people would be violent to Connie. What did you mean by that?
I meant that your views are so hateful and so damaging. The anger that is produced from that. There was a case done in 1995 on the brain, and they looked at male to female transitioners and saw that inherently their brain was a female brain. My brief search showed this. Yeah. So if only a brief little thing can show all this, then imagine
if you'd looked further into it. Exactly. Do you believe in women's brains?
No, that experiment that you're talking about has been widely disputed.
You've basically decided this because you just decide that it is. And also, you have no empathy, so therefore you have no empathy to apply to the situation.
Why do you say she has no empathy?
You don't understand it, so you have deemed it not a thing. But it is a thing because there are millions of people that are trans, and I resent you for deciding, and as many people have, I am not trans, so therefore no one can be trans. Who are you to say that? You've denied the brain thing, so you're saying someone with a female brain trapped in a male body can't live their life as they want to live because you've decided they can't.
What do you think about the female brains trapped in the male bodies?
I believe in biological reality and material facts. Like, you can think that I'm hateful, and lots of people do, and that's absolutely fine. I'm not going to change your mind on that. The difference is that I'm respecting your opinion, your right to hold it even if I don't agree with you, and that's all I'm asking for.
It's easier to respect my opinion. My opinion doesn't make people want to kill themselves. My issue with you, which is why I made such an effort to even be here to tell you to your face, is that you are damaging and hurting people so horribly.
But Khadija, we're going around in circles just because you...
Yeah, we're going around in circles because narcissists don't have enough empathy to ever listen to people like me. That's why we will continue to go around in circles, because you will never...
She's hardly spoken.
So who's the narcissist in that particular conversation? Anyway, because of all that's going on and the things that are being promoted in universities that are not at all being canceled, I just want to feel just a few things that I found in the news just in the past few days that are being promoted. For example, the NHS-funded Doctor of Clinical Psychology at King's College London, this program is saying basically that they are being put into separate groups to learn about addressing whiteness. So there will be spaces that are for white people and spaces for non-white people, and they will be put into separate spaces to talk about race, to support equitable experiences for service users in the NHS. There is decolonization of the curriculum for midwives going on by the Royal College of Midwifery, saying that education and practice are rooted in Eurocentric culture and practices which may not reflect the diversity of women and families being cared for in maternity services. The British Academy of Management's Guide to Decolonizing the Business School Curriculum says many students and staff come to the UK from other countries, including the so-called Global South. Therefore, decolonizing the curriculum efforts are designed to improve the education offerings in UK higher education. And I just want to say, once you start to see this pattern, as I have over the past couple of years, and you start to see academia for not what it was when I started 20 years ago, but what it has become, it's really hard to unsee it. James Lindsay, who's been interviewed recently on the UK column, is, again, another former academic who saw what was happening. And they did a grievance studies hoax set of papers where they made up fake papers and got them submitted and accepted into academic journals in the past few. This was from 2017, 2018. One of the titles was "The Conceptual Penis as a Social Construct," based on the idea that preoperative transgender males don't have an actual penis, just a conceptual one or a socially constructed one. And so we see this over and over again, that more and more these kinds of things that are being accepted. I posted something on Twitter over the weekend that got over 8,000 views and lots of conversation going. That was from a woman who wrote a book called Geologic Life, Inhuman Intimacies and the Geophysics of Race. She is a professor of not human geography, but inhuman geography. That's INHUMAN at Queen Mary University of London. And she goes on to basically say that geology and the earth is racist, and we have set of racial constructs around describing the earth, and therefore we have geotrauma in colonial afterlives. And she demonstrates that race is just as much a geological formation as a biological one. And so you see these things and you don't know what they're talking about, really. And so this leads to my news, which I'm really happy and a bit nervous, I have to say, to admit to our viewers now, which is that on Tuesday of last week, I resigned from academia. I tweeted about this. It got over 18,000 views and gained me hundreds of new followers. So thank you for those of you on Twitter who have given me your support. I'll just read from my tweet here just a bit, just saying I'm still grieving the loss. Maybe I would go back someday in the future if universities and ideas are no longer controlled by the thought police and the evil globalist agendas that tell academics and students what to say, think, teach, research, and write. But that's unlikely. The past 2 years that I've been through of grievances, formal disciplinary action against me, performance improvement plans, forced mediation, and so on by the university and my formal professional association just got to be too much. The so-called gross misconduct charges that were pending against me for a single unfortunate comment that I actually made on Ben Rubin's podcast were likely going to make the university fire me soon anyway. I hope that those of you who know me personally will recognize that although I do think differently, which I used to think was a good attribute for a professor, I don't hate anyone, and I only ever act with the best of intentions toward everyone. But I'm really happy to say that as a result of all this, that I am now moving on to devote my time entirely to UK column, and there's lots of exciting things that will be happening for me and hopefully for the column this year. And now that I'm really free to really start exposing the truth, I'm really going to start to go after all of this. So thank you to all the groups, all the people, you know who you are, who have been amazingly supportive throughout this transition that I've made into someone and something slightly different and maybe slightly damaged, but definitely stronger for it. And I just want to say that we will all keep fighting together. So I want to thank everyone out there for everything that you have done for me. And I hope to give it back to you in the future.
Diane, thank you very much for that, and well done for having the courage to make that immensely difficult decision. And we're delighted to have you here with the UK column. So well done. Well, over to you, Ben, for the last little segment, and just remind people that earlier in today's news, Klaus Schwab was talking about, or it was mentioning in relation to Klaus Schwab, global shapers. I prefer to call them change agents, but I think you're going to give us a little peek into how this shaper change agent system works.
Yes, I think I am. I'm going to pose a question to the viewers that I've been asking myself over Christmas, which is, who is Casey Calista? There she is. You can see her there, making videos on LinkedIn primarily. She's become a little bit of a social media celebrity in the world of tech policy. She's a public policy professional, and she is leading beyond authority. Brian mentioned common purpose earlier, and leading beyond authority is one of the methods that common purpose graduates are steeped in when they go on their programs. Brian also talked about occupying the space between people and politics. I think that's what this young lady is doing, actually. And let's have a little look at her background. So this is from her LinkedIn profile. I've just pulled out a few roles that I think are of interest. She was a research fellow at the Rhodes Project. So she's connected to the Rhodes Fellowship, the Rhodes Scholarship, network. So famous Rhodes scholars include Bill Clinton, for example, but these people are all over the place, a bit like the Young Global Leaders Program. It's another one of those kinds of operations. She was also a manager at Political Pixel. So this is Labour List, Left Foot Forward, kind of left-wing political websites here in the UK. She was the founder of the UK Public Affairs Tech Practice at Hill & Knowlton Strategies. Now, Hill & Knowlton is a WPP communications agency, and the chief executive of WPP, Mark Reed, is a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader, importantly, and this is really lobbying, right? Corporate money influencing policy. And at the same time, I've just skipped ahead. At the same time that she was in that role, she founded, you can see at the top there, something called Labour Digital. Right, so this is the Labour Party digital policy think tank. Yeah, and according to Politico, she was one of the most effective conveners in Labour circles. And at the same time, she established this thing called Women in Tech Policy, the Women in Tech Policy Network, which you can see on the top right-hand side there, right? And I'm going to explain a little bit more about these. I think this is a fascinating little nexus that I've come across that is really right at the centre of the most important policy discussion going on in the country right now. Yeah, how to regulate technology. This touches on absolutely everything. So we've met Casey Calista. I'll come back to her in a minute. I also want to introduce you to this lady, Dr. Hannah Shimko, who is a good pal of Casey Calista. And she is a co-founder in the Women in Tech Policy Network. And she started Digital Lib Dems after encouragement from Casey Calista. And then also in this little group, you've got this lady, Sarah Jane Sewell, who is the director of Digital Tories. And she knows Casey Calista very well because she was a referee, or what does she call it? Yeah, a referee at her naturalisation ceremony. So Casey Calista is actually an American citizen. She now has dual British and American citizenship. Sarah Jane Sewell was part of that process. You can see her there in the flowery dress at the ceremony. This was back in December. So what you have here is these three women representing Labour Digital, Digital Tories, Digital Lib Dems, who are all part of this thing, Women in Tech Policy Network, right? So actually, we're not having separate discussions in the parties about tech policy. This is all focused on these ladies who aren't elected, and they're all doing corporate jobs on the side, right? And that's basically how this uniparty system is operating. And Casey Calista is absolutely slap bang in the middle of it, right? So these videos, and this is just a handful, right? She's putting one out every couple of days. And she was straight out the gate in the new year, by the way. So I think January 2nd even, she put up a brand new one, right? So she was absolutely on the button with this. She's talking to civil servants, she's talking to politicians, she's talking to policymakers, to the think tanks, to corporate communications people, to the guy second right there. He's a staffer for a Labour MP, and she's talking about how do I get into the inbox of the Labour MP. And crucially, she's putting her own perspective into the mix at every single opportunity, and she is guiding and directing this conversation. And we just got a couple of little clips from her. The first one, which we're going to show now, which is focused on digital ID.
Digital ID is going to be an increasingly big topic that we all have to talk about. It's something that we're going to have to get right quite quickly, definitely within this parliament, and figure out what's next in the digital ID space.
Okay, so digital ID, definitely happening, according to Casey Calista, and we've got to really figure out what's going on in this space. And then this final clip, which I'm going to show, which is focused on disinformation.
I talk and think a lot about disenfranchisement and disinformation. I think we're going to see that more. I think to tackle disinformation, there's going to have to be something that's big and actually unpredictable itself that happened. I think there's a huge potential for that as we go forward in time. So I'm expecting something big, like a huge story to land, and then that is much more likely to propel further action into how we as a society, both in the UK and globally, think about tackling disinformation.
Does she know something we don't?
It would appear so.
Right. I'd love to know who's pulling her strings. Anyway, more on that in the future, I'm sure.
Okay, Ben, thank you very much for that. Well, we've ended on the hot spot, which is basically understanding how the political agenda is now running in this country. What can you do to slow all this down? It's expose them, it's challenge them wherever they appear on social media or elsewhere. They have to be challenged. This is fighting the local battle, and this is what is needed if you want to tackle this globalist, pernicious globalist agenda that's coming in. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us today, wherever you are in the world. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Diane. We will be back in a few minutes for extra time for our members. See you then. For other viewers, thank you very much for joining us. Have a good day. We'll be back on Wednesday. Bye-bye.